The subcommittee will come to order. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm pleased to welcome back to this committee the Department's highest science and technology leadership to testify on the fiscal year 2021 President's budget request for the Department of Defense Science and Technology programs. Before us today are the Services Technology and Acquisition Executives. These individuals must divide their attention between fielding the best technology to the warfighters as quickly and efficiently as possible in the near and midterm, and protecting the science and technological innovations that enable the Department to keep its technological edge over the long term. Undersecretary Mike Griffin, Assistant Secretary Bruce Jette, Assistant Secretary Hondo Geurts, and Assistant Secretary Roper, we welcome you here today and look forward to this important discussion. In a time when our national defense planning has shifted focus to great power competition, addressing the challenge from rising science powers requires an ambitious plan of national investment and aggressive talent development in science and technology. Funding for basic research, applied research, and advanced technology development in our universities, laboratories, small businesses, and the tech sector seeds the necessary science to grow the advanced technological capabilities required for our next generation military engagements. Yet, with bipartisan support for a drastic increase in investment in our national security innovation base in this era of strategic competition, somehow growth in the science and technology budget is almost always sacrificed to field the mature technologies of today. So how is it that this year, with an Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering created for the very purpose of looking past the horizon, and with a national security strategy that claims to be focused on deterring the wars of the next 2 to 3 decades, the Department was able to submit a budget request that was less proposed S&T funding than last year. Due to inflation and labor escalation of scientists and engineers, despite Congress's efforts to restore S&T funding each year, the S&T budget has been effectively shrinking for the past decade. In FY21, with the total Department and defense-wide S&T budgets annually decreasing for the first time in years, we are left wondering what the future of our defense will truly look like. Without both Department leadership and Congress protecting the S&T budget, our warfighters risk losing the technical edge to prevail in future conflicts of ever-evolving complexity. If the U.S. is to remain a global leader in technology, we cannot simply play defense, we must also play offense. Investments in science and research and other development efforts across the whole of government are necessary and vital to maintaining a technological edge. We must invest in STEM education, programs that develop junior talent into future tech leaders, university research, and actively endeavor to diversify our S&T workforce. We must implement policies that promote a sound economic, political, and strategic environment on U.S. soil where global collaboration, discovery, innovation, public institutions, and industry can all thrive. And I recognize that the open dialogue and debate of academia can be an anathema to the secrecy we rely on in the Department of Defense. But we must also recognize and embrace the competitive advantage our free society provides us to out-innovate and develop better products faster. Finally, I must emphasize that we will not attain the technological edge that we need if we refuse to take risks, push the scientific boundaries, and challenge the red tape. We must empower those who lean forward on innovation, whether it is to be in our laboratories, small businesses, universities, research offices, tech sector, or contracting offices. I realize that this does not come easily for the Department, as the overriding culture is one of risk avoidance, but we need to empower the S&T workforce and community to enable technological leaps that will ensure that our warfighters never enter a fair fight. With that, before we turn to our witnesses, I'm going to turn now to Ranking Member Stefanik for any remarks that she may have.
Thank you, Chairman Langevin, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. I want to stress how important our investments in science and technology and the innovation ecosystem are to our national and economic security. The National Defense Science and Technology Strategy, required by Congress and submitted in October of 2019, rightly noted that, quote, technology will be the currency of future strategic competition. This strategy identified the major modernization priorities and set a course for continued investment and, most importantly, persistent focus and accountability inside the Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering and across the services. I appreciate the Department's effort energizing the S&T enterprise around these critical technologies in order to enable our long-term preparedness for the future. There is recognition that the DoD cannot meet this challenge alone. I applaud your efforts to bolster the Defense Innovation Enterprise through initiatives like the Defense Innovation Unit, AFWorks, Army Applications Lab, Army Open Campus, and Naval X. However, we must view the adoption and application of commercial technologies as the new normal and not simply through the limited lens of a pilot program. Many of the new technologies that are being adopted for military applications grew out of defense basic research, but were matured, commercialized, and fielded with private sector investment. Disciplines like artificial intelligence, biotech, autonomous systems, and additive manufacturing have advanced significantly because of the investment and collaboration across the innovation ecosystem to include academia, industry, government, laboratories, and the venture capital community. I also firmly believe that science and technology is a team sport, and we must partner with our allies to develop the technologies and policies that will provide a Western, more responsible alternative to China's authoritarian approach. The Council of Foreign Relations Task Force on Innovation concluded in their final report that slowing China down is not as effective as outpacing it. With this challenge in mind, we must build the alliances and partnerships that will provide the investment, human capital, and shared research and development that can contest the goals of Made in China 2025. However, I remain concerned that our S&T investments represent a small amount of our overall defense budget and a decreasing percentage of our total RDT&E budget. In fact, last year, this Congress added nearly $2 billion in science and technology funding to the FY20 defense appropriation to make up for the shortfall in the budget request. This Congress, and this committee particularly, recognize the importance of research and development to our long-term technological superiority. Any degradation in these investments places the U.S. at a competitive disadvantage and, more importantly, risks skipping a generation of domestic science and engineering expertise that is so desperately needed and already in such short supply in disciplines like AI, mathematics, computer science, and aerospace engineering. Finally, we cannot allow our own risk aversion or fear of failure to constrain our military from acquiring breakthrough technologies. Congress has made strides over the last several years to provide flexibility to the Department in experimentation, rapid innovation and acquisition, and outreach through public-private partnerships. I'm particularly interested in understanding how these authorities are being utilized and what more we can do to improve our defense innovation ecosystem. Thank you again to our witnesses, and I yield back to the Chair.
Thank you, Ranking Member Stefanik. We'll now turn to our witnesses for their testimony. And with that, Secretary Griffin, you are now recognized.
Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Stefanik, I, in the interest of time, would prefer to yield back my time for an opening statement. My written statement has been submitted for the record. I don't think I can improve on it, so I will allow you to pass to the next witness.
Okay, thank you, Secretary Griffin. With that, Secretary Jette.
Chairman Langevin, Ranking Member Stefanik, and distinguished members of the Subcommittee on Intelligence, Emerging Threats and Capabilities, thank you for inviting me to discuss the Army's Science and Technology budget for fiscal year 21, and for making my written statement a part of the record for today's hearing. The Army's S&T program seeks to invest in a balanced portfolio of achieving a modernized force capable of conducting multi-domain operations across an array of scenarios in multiple theaters by 2035 and beyond. Our focus is on discovery and delivery of new and emerging technologies, then maturing technology to reduce programs' risk. Technology prototypes, proof, affordable and achievable requirements. Experimentation with soldiers refines new operational concepts enabled by the emerging technologies. We work closely with Army's Futures Command to identify technology requirements in the near, mid, and far term. Resources then are focused on Army modernization priorities, though not exclusively, to allow for unanticipated discovery. The Army's 9 priority research areas include disruptive energetics, quantum, hypersonic flight, artificial intelligence, autonomy, and science of advanced manufacturing, which closely align with both the 8 National Defense Strategy rapid technology advancements and OSD's 11 modernization priorities. We depend heavily on our S&T program to help prepare for the future, mitigate the possibility of technical surprise, and ensure that we are able to remain dominant in every environment. The Army also employs more than 25,000 military, civilian, and contract scientists, engineers, and technicians at laboratories across the country who are critical assets in identifying, developing, and demonstrating technical options. We are grateful to Congress for the numerous staffing flexibilities provided to the Army laboratories, such as direct hire authority, renewable term appointments, and other initiatives that have been instrumental in growing the technical workforce and shaping their skills in emerging areas. Let me briefly talk about reform. With the support of Congress, the Army has undertaken a number of initiatives to improve efficiency and effectiveness. Our intellectual property policy fosters dialogue with industry early in the process so we are clear about our data requirements and data rights, as well as our efforts to maintain technological advantage. Talent management is critical to efficient and effective operations. We're not only interested in recruiting top talent, but have a number of programs underway to retain them. This includes a revised recruiting, retention, and management program for hard skills, particularly STEM, officers in the military. Lastly, we continue to expand our industry outreach program to actively seek out non-traditional businesses with new and innovative ideas that are willing to engage with the Army. AFC's Capital Factory, Innovation Days, the 75th Innovation Command, combined with industry days by the PE program executive offices, establishment of the Rapid Capability and Critical Technology Office, Open Campus at Army Research Laboratories, X-Tech Search, and many other programs have been fostered to just open these doors for innovators. Thank you for your strong support of the Army programs, the authorities you have provided, and this opportunity to discuss Army S&T. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Secretary. Now, Secretary Geurts, you're recognized.
Chairman Langevin, Ranking Member Stefanik, distinguished members of the subcommittee, thanks for the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss the Department of the Navy's science and technology efforts and how they support the National Defense Strategy and, most importantly, our sailors and Marines. It's my honor to represent the entire science and technology enterprise in this hearing today. Before I begin, I would like to extend the Department's deepest condolences to the 2 families of the Marine Raiders killed this weekend in Iraq, Gunny Sergeant Pongo and Captain Neves. Their sacrifice serves as a stark reminder of the seriousness of our jobs as we work together to best serve our Marines and sailors. The Department's Fiscal Year 21 S&T program aggressively pursues increased lethality and modernization with the greatest potential to deliver nonlinear warfighting advantages. To deliver future naval power, the Navy and Marine Corps invest in a diverse set of innovative thinkers and doers. Included in this are our technical workforce at the Office of Naval Research Laboratory, and our many warfare centers. It also includes our over 341 university partners, 91 nonprofit partners, and over 20,000 small and large businesses, all working together to support our efforts. Scaling innovation requires tool sets to enhance the impact of this R&D. Our Naval X office, established in 2019, creates the network that thickens our ability to share best practices, relationships, and key ideas across the entire Department of the Navy. Naval X guides, empowers, and connects our workforce to achieve the pivot speed that we need to have at enterprise scale. Part of this program includes our tech bridges, which leverage and establish ecosystems of expertise all across the country. We currently have 6 tech bridges established That will double here in the next 30 days. I'd like to thank Congress for the wide range of authorities you have provided us. The Navy's taking full advantage of those authorities to increase agility, refine and streamline our business processes, and drive efficiencies. These authorities are making a real difference every day in how the Department of the Navy both recapitalizes our capital assets and strengthens our workforce. Authorities such as 233 in the FY17 NDAA allowed us to decrease processing time for procurement, contracts, infrastructure action, and IT actions. We've saved over 500,000 processing days using that authority alone. Again, it is making a real difference to folks down in the trenches, and I thank you very much for that. As we continue to leverage these authorities and get our iterations speed up, we're looking for other innovative business and architectural strategies that will let us go at the speed of relevance. These include reforming our SHIBR process, where we've taken, in our most recent BAA, our end-to-end cycle time from idea to solution on contract from about 124 days down to 28 days. We'll continue to work with our teammates here at the table as we all try and compete at the global scale. And we thank you for the strong support this subcommittee has always provided our sailors and Marines and their families. And thank you for the opportunity to appear here today.
Thank you, Secretary Geurts. Secretary Roper, you're now recognized.
Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Stefanik, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today on an important topic for our military, which is science and technology. It's an honor to represent the Department of the Air Force and to be here with my distinguished colleagues. And as I testified last year, preparing for a hearing like this is good for the soul. You get to go through a lot of amazing ideas, amazing technology that are being worked on by people in our laboratory that really do make science fiction sound like it's going to be real in the future. Two I'd like to highlight are one group working on nano-sized sonograms that are trying to make the Star Trek tricorder a reality in future. And another is a new material called samarium nickel oxide, which decouples the temperature of that material from its thermal emission, paving the way for what could be a cloaking device in future. So I'm all for making Star Trek real for the military in the future. We just need a warp drive to get it over the goal line. It's easy to stand back from amazing technology, amazing ideas like that, and feel comforted that the future of our military is in good hands. And I have all of the confidence in our research enterprise. But our national security strategy makes it clear we are competing against peers that can match us tech for tech, person for person. And so we have to bring a competitive mindset into this important portfolio and make days and weeks count. Last year, we requested $2.8 billion in our S&T account for the Department of the Air Force, up 6% from the previous year. We were able to hold that steady in this fiscal year in our request, but take up our research and development efforts in classified S&T. I'd be happy to share the classified portfolio with you in a closed setting. We've also made a significant reform in consolidating our program elements. We're wanting to put the amount of accounts that we have in S&T, we want to reduce them so we have greater flexibility and agility to adapt to successes and also commercial tech trends. Both yourself, Mr. Chairman, and Ranking Member Stefanik, your opening comments make it clear that our challenge is that we're a free and open society competing against a closed society. The closed society that China and others have give them the ability to nationalize their industry base and nationalize their S&T efforts. So we're going to have to find a way to make the Department of Defense work in this broader ecosystem in a way that's win-win. We are currently 20% of the R&D in this country. 80% is commercial. If we don't find a way to work in the 80%, then doing the 20% well will be insufficient to compete and win long-term. So we have to do four things to become a modern S&T enterprise that can compete and win long-term. We need to be the best inventor of technology that we're not going to get from the commercial sector either at all or on time. We need to be the best leverager of technology that's coming out of commercial innovation. And we also need to be a partner and a catalyzer of commercial tech. And then finally, as all of my colleagues have noted, we have to compete for talent. All of this is on a foundational bedrock of quality people that are world-leading, focused on our missions. So I'll go through an example or two of each. In terms of inventing, there are so many military-unique technology applications that we need world-leading researchers on. Hypersonics and directed energy probably come to mind, But there are things we need to start doing on next-generation solid-state devices that will be required by the military before they will commercially, that our research lab is leading the charge, working with universities across the country. I'm also excited that the Department of the Air Force has created a new process to help transition technology out of the lab and into programs of record. We didn't have one before. So we've modeled this process called the Vanguard process after the Strategic Capabilities Office, partnering the technologist with a program executive officer so that the details of transition, the logistics, the cost, the training that might not be resident in the laboratory get augmented by a program executive officer that knows what needs to be done to get to the goal line. We're leveraging technologies like AI across initiatives like Fuel AI and our Distributed Common Ground Station, and have finally gotten that to initial operational capability. And we're partnering on reforms like SBIR, fundamentally changing the way we work with tech startups, increasing our output by threefold, and bringing companies that wouldn't have worked with the Air Force in. I'll be happy to share more details in testimony. Finally, the new thing we're working on that I hope to testify more on next year is catalyzing. I have an example or two which we can hit in the hearing today, but we need to look at where commercial markets are going, skate ahead of the puck, and see how the military market can help bring not just commercial technology to bear for the warfighter, but markets to bear in this country faster than our competitors. That's part of competing in this global ecosystem where we play a role that is synergistic with our commercial counterparts. And finally, with respect to talent, as I said, it's foundational. You've given us authorities to hire better, hire faster, and be competitive with commercial pay scales. We've used these aggressively in the Air Force. We've gotten great talent, but we can do more. We can never be satisfied with the talent we have. Thank you for your questions today, and thank you again for this hearing.
Thank you, Secretary Roper, and thank you, gentlemen, for your testimony here today. We'll now go to member questions. I'll start by recognizing myself for 5 minutes. As the Secretary Griffin, I'll start with you. As the R&E, we look to you to champion the science and technology and innovation ecosystem of the department. Of course, we were disappointed to see that this year the 6.1 to 6.3 S&T budget was less than last year. The Defense Planning Guidance has historically directed at least 0% real growth, so the S&T budget was effectively $500 million less than we expected. Indeed, your defense-wide R&E budget was even $245 million less than last year's request. How did the department walk away from its commitment to protect the science and technology budget this year?
Thank you. Sir, the department has not walked away from that. We highly value S&T funding. This is a tough budget environment. We don't have top-line growth, and we have many, many priorities. As we went through our budget work, I, in fact, was an advocate in R&E for S&T top-line growth. But in reality, there are no bad programs. And in an environment where we didn't have any bad programs, we were inevitably, in order to close our budget, we were going to have to make priority choices, and we did. When we talk about S&T, I will point out on behalf of my service acquisition executive partners that actually the Army grew by 6%, Navy grew by 1%, Air Force maintained 0% real growth. It was OSD that took a 4% cut. So the parsing of our S&T budget was done across the department very carefully. I'll only conclude by saying we did the best that we thought we could.
Well, Secretary Griffin, I appreciate your perspective. I see it a different way, but Secretary Roper, let me turn to you. I'm a Star Trek fan, so I like the idea of developing the war tribe for the next generation. But you know, the reality is, you're the Air Force's well-known champion of innovation. How did the Air Force's S&T request come in at less than 0% real growth from last year's requested funding level, and how did the Air Force's basic research and advanced technology development decrease by about 8% each? And what will it take for the department to champion the long-term science and technology budget in the face of demands to the field, to field new capabilities quickly.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, as Dr. Griffin alluded, it was a tough budget year, and sometimes the innovation voices did not win at budget closeout. A lot of things on the Air Force's plate with nuclear modernization, the stand-up Space Force, Joint All-Domain Command and Control, and unfortunately, when we had to make the budget balance, we had to look for areas to take risk, and I share your concern. Taking risk in basic research may not put the military at risk today or tomorrow, but it is eroding that foundational layer that creates the game-changing technologies in the future. The one area that I can share good news, and I would certainly invite the committee to take a briefing on our classified S&T. It doesn't get reported in white world S&T, but as we think about competing against countries like China and Russia, if we have foundational research, that publishing it would simply let our adversary jump ahead. It's great that we have researchers that are willing to work with us at a classified level, not publish their research, and help us have a military edge. We made a sizable movement in that portfolio, and I would invite the committee to take a briefing if of interest.
Thank you. And before the last question I had for Secretary Griffin, for the rapid technological advancements outlined in the NDS and for your 11 modernization priorities, last year's NDAA tasked the Department to lean forward on strategically developing policies on how we should use and deploy these future technologies, and to consider how these emerging capabilities will contribute to new security strategies. Concurrency in policy and tech development, I believe, is critical to successful employment of capabilities and being a global leader in establishing norms for use of technologies. Yet too often policy lags development. In your view, what action does the Department need to take to promote concurrency in policy, employment concepts, training, doctrine, and other matters as technologies mature?
Sir, I will take that question for the record. I can't answer that here today.
Okay. I think that's pretty would be a pretty basic answer. We have to make sure that we're doing policy development and technology development simultaneously. This doesn't seem to be rocket science.
I don't disagree. Your question,
Mr. Stefanik.
I'm sorry, sir. I don't disagree, but your question was quite detailed, and I want to give it the attention it deserves.
Fair enough. Thank you, Secretary. Ms. Stefanik is recommended.
Thanks, Chairman. Dr. Griffin, I wanted to ask you about 5G. As you know, Congress provided $200 million to the Department in FY20 for the 5G Next Generation Information Communications Technology Initiative. This is, of course, in order to advance U.S. leadership in 5G and next-generation wireless technologies. The Department has requested $449 million in FY21. Can you explain how this is improving the government-wide strategy to ensure U.S. leadership in 5G, and how has private industry, from your perspective, responded to this R&D initiative?
Second question, or second part first, private industry has responded with both feet, jumping in with both feet on the initiative that DoD has taken. We're, as I'm sure you're aware, we've released RFPs to industry through our Spectrum Consortium. We are judging those now. We have received many proposals to collaborate with us. We are putting forward initially experiments on actually we're going for 5 different bases because the Congress has called out Nellis as a specific base where we must experiment, and we have 4 others in our plans. We are conducting 5G development experiments to include smart depots, smart ports, smart airports, capitalizing on the Internet of Things capability that 5G enables. Critical to our work in 5G is the concept of spectrum sharing, in fact, dynamic spectrum sharing, so that we can get, if you will, more use out of the spectrum real estate that we have, because the spectrum real estate's not increasing. So we're all in on 5G at the at the cutting edge level of learning how to do the things we have to do for both spectrum sharing and Internet of Things to make 5G reach the promise that it offers.
Shifting gears, Dr. Griffin, particularly when we're thinking about research, and in my opening statement I talked about the importance of partnerships with academia, with labs, with private sector. There have been several recent high-profile cases of researchers with ties to the Chinese government, and this has brought a lot of attention to the issue of research security and illicit technology transfer. These concerns are amplified when these individuals are working on DoD-funded research, in some cases for over a decade. Do you believe that the universities, the individual researchers, better understand the nature of the threat, and what should the Department of Defense be doing to protect these important investments and partnerships when it comes to basic research?
We, too, are, of course, aware of these high-profile incidents. I don't want to be glib about this issue. This is one that is of the greatest importance to me personally and to the department. So, first of all, I want to say that identifying individuals who are behaving badly and indeed illegally is a high priority for us. We are implementing measures to gather more information about who is doing research on the DoD dime. And we are working with universities and other research centers to do exactly that. But when we identify these people, whom we believe to be a small percentage of the total research community, to us this is evidence that the system is actually working. Are there undiscovered people out there who are trying to damage the United States? Yes, of course there are. But this is the country from which other people are trying to steal. This is the country where other people want to send their kids to be educated. It should worry us if we are not the people that others are coming after, because then we don't matter. Now, we absolutely want to prevent intellectual property theft. We want to prevent exfiltration of key ideas to our adversaries. But we got where we are in the world by espousing an open research community, an open innovation base, by being a country where others could come and start businesses and succeed. 45% of our Fortune 500 companies are headed by a CEO who is an immigrant or the child of an immigrant. 38% of the Nobel Prize winners since 2000 are immigrants. There is a risk
Dr. Griffin,
reward.
I understand the value of immigrants, and I've been long a leader when it comes to making sure that we have an immigration system that recognizes the importance of those that are highly educated, particularly in those innovative tech sectors, as well as in my district, some of the issues related to agriculture. So I understand what the stats are in immigration issues, but I'm concerned when we are surprised with headlines about the head of the Department of Chemistry at Harvard University who is using Department of Defense research dollars, and that information is going to China. So while I understand your point that we are the innovative goal for other countries to look to, I cannot stress how important vigilance is to make sure that we understand this is taxpayer dollars. And when we're talking about game-changing technologies, whether it's AI, whether it's quantum, we need to make sure that the U.S. maintains supremacy and is ahead of the game. So I know you didn't want to be glib about it, but I just want to underscore that having an understanding of who is working on these projects, and if there's any foreign nationals working on Department of Defense funded research projects, we need to get our arms around these problems. With that, I yield back.
Thank you, Member Stefanik. Mr. Larson is now recognized.
Thank you. Dr. Griffin, because we matter, as you noted, can you be a little more specific about what the department's doing and working with DHS and the FBI to share valid counterintelligence threats and best practices with universities conducting DoD research?
Well, we are working with the university community and with DHS and FBI to do exactly as you suggest, to make sure we know who is working on our projects, to know what other funding sources in particular they have, to know what their origins and connections are so that we can identify individuals who are operating here on false colors. We are doing those things, and we are stepping up our game as Ms. Stefanik suggested that we should. Any individual who slips through the net will be a high-profile case.
Yeah.
But
is there any objective analysis of the work that you're doing that we can assess ourselves?
I will take that for the record, and if we have objective analysis on statistics, we will get that back to you.
Yeah. Just how many chemistry departments are there in the United States in American colleges and universities?
I don't know, sir.
A lot, probably.
Probably a few.
And there's one happens to be at Harvard, which is high profile. There might be others, I don't know, but it's certainly a high profile case, but it's one.
And one bad actor can create an awful lot of damage, as we have seen with other insider cases.
Absolutely, I agree.
Most of all of our highest profile exfiltrations have been insider threats, native-born U.S. citizens. Rick Ames.
Yeah. Well, let us know what we can do to help you on this, because we do want to help you. So I appreciate that. I think can you address in your written testimony on quantum science? There's no page number, but quantum sciences will continue to emphasize atomic clocks and quantum sensors. These quantum technologies provide the most concrete opportunities, so on, so on, so on. But your statement before that says quantum science takes advantage of fundamental physical properties to devise new technologies whose performance far exceeds what is currently available. And then you make some comment that basically says we shouldn't get too excited just now. It doesn't do everything that people theorize, perhaps, but it perhaps can one day. What are you trying to tell us about quantum science so that we can kind of look at it more realistically?
That's an excellent question. Thank you. It's difficult to pick up any magazine or newspaper article focusing on science and technology generally without finding some reference to quantum computing, quantum communication, things like that are not beyond the boundaries of physics as we understand them, but whose technological implementation could be and will be extraordinarily difficult. Those are longer-term things. Now, the DoD is, in fact, investing substantial monies in quantum computing and other initiatives. But the nearer-term initiatives that we believe will pay off are the things to which I alluded in my testimony. First and foremost, quantum clocks to give us timekeeping precision, synchronized timekeeping precision, 2 or possibly even 3 orders of magnitude better than we have today. That's critically important for maintaining communications in a GPS-denied environment where we might have to fight a war. Quantum sensors for inertial navigation or navigation by other means. Quantum magnetometers come to mind for mapping and then following the Earth's magnetic field, which provides very detailed navigation information. These are the things that we will see in the next few years and where we are focusing a substantial amount of our effort.
And I presume, I think perhaps the chair and the ranking member in their opening statements talked about the role of the commercial technologies in supporting the department on this particular set of issues.
We are working with our commercial partners, some of whom are spending quite a lot of money in these arenas.
I heard they're spending a quantum amount, in fact. With that, I will...
Quite a lot.
Quite a lot,
sir.
sure, yeah.
Sir.
I'll yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Mr. Abraham is now recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I read your bios on all of you, and even though I have 2 advanced degrees, I feel very inadequate among your presence. I read your your written statements. They are written by scientists. They're very detailed. They're very structured, and I appreciate the attention to detail that you gave into the written statements. Dr. Griffin, your resume, of course, precedes you with your stint at NASA and your Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory head. We appreciate that. And I'll tell all of you, I personally am very grateful that you are at the helm of these agencies watching our back. We know we're bad actors. As Representative Stefanik said, we know they're out there, and we certainly have to guard against them. But men and women of your acuity, where you are, I think we're in a good spot. And I simply want to give you just a minute. I'll go down the line, start with you, Dr. Griffin, in an open mic scenario that we are in here, just to highlight what you would like to highlight in your particular realms, just briefly, so that the general public that may hear, watch this hearing knows what's going on at your level. Dr. Griffin, I'll start with you.
Well, we have quite a number of initiatives, as has been said. We have 11 modernization priorities taken from the National Defense Strategy, which I've said publicly and will say again is the best I have seen in decades. So I'm bought in. The NDS urges us to consider that we are, again, in a great power competition for the first time since the Cold War, and urges us to understand that we will not win that competition with the weapons and the tools of yesterday. So in my particular area, we are working on modernizing our space architecture. That is critical to how the U.S. fights and wins wars, and our adversaries know that, and they're coming after us. I have been quite public about the need for hypersonics offense and defense capability to allow us to match what our adversaries are doing and to be able to defend against them. In a less publicized way, we have undertaken a wholesale revamping of our microelectronics initiative. The DoD is, most of the important microelectronics work is done commercially. DoD is about 1% of the demand. We rely on our commercial partners completely for everything we do in microelectronics, and none of our systems will work without it. So we are fully embracing the need to be able to produce trusted microelectronics on a risk-assessed basis, all the way from initial design right through fabrication and assembly. That's a critical area, and our industrial base is under siege from abroad, as you know. It's in the headlines every day. So those are a few, with my minute or two, those are a few of the things we're working on that are very high priority for us.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Sir, I hit 3 quick points for you. I'd like to just touch base with the bad actor question. For the Army, I came in, I took a look at the students we had in the different universities. I went to MIT. We have a UARC there, so I know where to go, and I start rooting around there, and I found out that I had twice as many Chinese students on my payroll as I had U.S. students. And I'll solicit this because I need help, I think, in Congress. So when I began to try and negotiate with the university, because we send the money to the university, they pick the students that volunteer to come to work, not me, the other way around, because of the way that it's structured. And their issue is, I can't tell somebody they can't apply for the program and be selected because we have laws against national origin preferences. So they couldn't exclude the Chinese students, and I'm trying to do that. So we're both trying to apply the laws and apply reason, and it took us quite a while to come to a reasonable conclusion. I think it's important, not because we don't publish at 6-1 level the work, but there's a big difference between reading a paper and actually having done it and being able to fill all those knowledge gaps. So I just think that's one of the areas we could use help with. We in the Army, we put a deliberate focus. As you saw, we kept our 6.1 to 6.3 budget robust, plussing it up about 5.5%. But we've increased our 6.4 budget by a third, fundamentally because for the last 20 years, we didn't focus on transitioning any of the new technologies that were coming both in the military sector and the commercial sector. So we brought those in as well. That's one reason why we've plussed up in that area. And I'm over time, so I'll just finalize. My third one is I think that we could have a much deeper conversation on the relationship between 6.1, 6.2, and 6.3 funds and how they play out in a time frame, given the speed of technology today.
Well, thank you. I'm out of time. If the other two gentlemen would give me a written response, I would certainly appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the indulgence.
Thank you, Mr. Abraham. Mr. Cooper is now recognized. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hope that Dr. Roper's initial comments were not too helpful to any possible adversary out there. I know you just described it in the most general terms, but it seems to me that there are funding issues and then there are jurisdictional issues. And Dr. Griffin has already mentioned that we wish in many ways the funding had been higher. Let me set that aside for a minute because with jurisdiction issues, we're going to have an MDA hearing tomorrow, and laser scaling was taken away from MDA entirely. Space sensors for hypersonics were given to SDA, and as you well know, RKV was killed entirely by R&E, giving us an 8 to 10 year exposure problem. So it seems like jurisdiction isn't necessarily being handled in a way that people are understanding. Now, maybe there is a good explanation, but I'm going to face a lot of grief from my Republican colleagues that directed energy for MDA is now 0. Likewise, in Dr. Roper's testimony, the new NTS-3 capability looks very exciting. All these Vanguard programs, awesome, Skyborg, Golden Horde, they have cool names. I'm assuming the Space Force will end up with these at some point, but, good to know. There's probably no good way to handle jurisdictional issues because everybody thinks they're the best, but can you help me understand some of these things? Zeroing out directed energy for MDA?
Directed energy is important to us across the department. The laser scaling initiative at MDA, again, I get back to the issue of priorities. The laser scaling program was one of my personal missions that I wanted to prosecute. However, we have limited funds and many claims on those funds, and choices have to be made, and that is a program of significant size that could be used to supply funds for other areas and is definitely longer term. It is not going to put a weapon in the field next year or the year after. So we cut it. With regard to space sensors given to SDA, MDA is still developing the requirements for the space sensors that we need for the low altitude constellation, and we'll be developing those. So, however, the overall architecture is under the direction of the Space Development Agency, and the sensors have to blend into a larger architecture. So I think that is the right move, but MDA is not doing one bit less work than had been planned to do previously. I misremember your third question, sir.
Well, why don't we just move on, because jurisdictional issues are less important than overall funding.
Oh, you did mention RKV. Yeah. If you would like me to stand down, I will, or I can answer.
Well, I think we've all understood that, although it's my understanding that JROC yesterday either shortened the acquisition period by 2 years or it didn't at all. I've heard two different versions from two different attendees. So,
well, I was there, and I would say that neither of those is true. So,
well, what is true? 9 years?
The the government estimate for the time to complete the deployment of the Next Generation Interceptor is about a 10-year program. That estimate was put together at a 75% confidence level so that I could have some surety that we were not overpromising and under-delivering. We believe, based on RFIs received back from the contractors, that some significant shortening of that period is possible. And when we have responses to our requests for proposal that are about to be released, we will be happy to come in and share those with you. But in replanning this program, which we canceled because it was failing technically, in replanning the program, I did not want to give you a buy-in estimate, if you will, of something that a few years from now you would be looking at it and saying, well, Dr. Griffin's promises didn't come true. I didn't want to be making those kinds of promises.
Well, these are the same contractors who failed to deliver us a space vehicle that could go to space.
No, sir. One of the contractors who will be proposing will be the prior contractor, but there are 3 other contractors in the competitive procurement phase for a total of 4 that we will be evaluating proposals from.
Okay, good. I see my time has expired. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Mr. Bacon is now recognized. Before we go to Mr. Bacon, today is the rollout of the Cyber Solarium Commission report, which I'm one of the 4 members of Congress, and of course, we had the executive branch participation as well as legislative and private sector. We're doing the rollout today, and departing for that event right now. Mr. Cooper is going to take over chairing the rest of the hearing. But I thank the witnesses for their testimony here today, and look forward to following up on these issues. So with that, again, Mr. Bacon is now recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, gentlemen, for being here. I have a question on the university-affiliated research centers. As a representative of Nebraska, I stood at the doorstep of U.S. STRATCOM, and the National Strategic Research Institute at the University of Nebraska is dedicated to combating weapons of mass destruction. It's the only university-affiliated research center sponsored by Combatant Command, which has engaged over 40 department sponsors and research valued at over $160 million. So my question is, how are the entities you represent investing in academic partners to support mission requirements and utilize the dedicated research and engineering expertise ready to support the Department of Defense? Thank you.
Well, university-affiliated research centers, UARCs, UARCs, are among our go-to establishments for when we have technical questions, technical design, technical development for cutting-edge projects that are not something industry can supply, and end of sentence. So we use them a lot. The largest of those UARCs is the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Library up the road here in Maryland, and then we have smaller UARCs throughout the country. They are well and fully utilized, sir.
I know the one in Nebraska loves what it's doing with STRATCOM, and I think they're now working with SOCOM. Gentlemen, anything else?
Yes, sir, at least for the Department of Navy, they're vital. Johns Hopkins being one of many, Penn State, I mean, they are an integrated part of our R&D establishment, and we could not complete the mission without them.
Sir, for Department of the Air Force, they're critical, and their role is changing now that we live in a world of global tech. So we love initiatives where we're working with universities, like our AI accelerator at MIT was a big win for us last year, having world-leading researchers at the CSAIL Institute working on problems of military import. But when we need to transition that technology into the military, we need people that understand our programs, that have clearances, and that have the technical chops to be able to guide us between the scientists and the program managers. I think they're going to be extremely vital to help us bridge between commercial innovators and the department, just like they have in times past, while continuing their defense unique role.
Sir, the Army has 3 UARCs. One is the Institute for Collaborative Biotechnologies. It's focused on biotechnology from anything from consideration of disease issues to using biomaterials to create electronic devices and material structures. That's at the University of Santa Barbara. We have the Institute for Soldier Nanotechnology, the one I mentioned up at MIT, where we do a great deal of technology development for anything from fabrics and clothing, which sounds not very sexy, but when you think about what Under Armour does and how much money they made for some of their clothes, apparently it's pretty interesting technology. And then we have the Institute for Creative Technology, which focuses on, it leverages the industry, entertainment industry, and the technologies there to help us with training and artificial environments. Each of those places that we work also have a related Army laboratory, so that we make sure we have a relationship that can bring the technology out of those into the Army when appropriate, or bring problems from the Army into them.
A follow-on question, and I want to ask about particularly nuclear C3 or NC3. Most of that technology is 1970s, though we do got the new Stratcom building. Is there an opportunity here with the universities or UARCs to figure out where we're going to go with the next level on NC3? Now, it's maybe more of an Air Force question, I guess, but it could be Navy, too. Thank you.
Yes, Congressman, we have a large portion of the NC3 portfolio, and absolutely. There are a lot of commercial technologies that we can bring to bear for NC3, and General Hyten, our Vice Chairman, the Joint Chiefs, really brings a great perspective in, coming in from Stratcom, that having the one trusted, perfectly secure way of communicating is probably not our future. We're going to need to have multiple conduits, use statistics as our ally, and a lot of commercial technology can aid that. But similar to the previous point, we can work with commercial innovators, but when we got to get down to classified applications, we need trusted insiders, and that's what UARCs and FFRDCs can do. In the case of MIT, we have Lincoln Laboratory. It's a federally funded research and development center sitting up, at Hanscom Air Force Base that can work closely with campus to take technology out of that university into the Air Force. The same model will work well with companies.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chair,
Thank you. Ms. Trahan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm so happy that you brought up MIT Lincoln Labs in the heart of my district. Thank you for that. This question is actually for you, Dr. Roper. The SBIR program, the Small Business Innovation Research Program, is one of the most successful and effective programs that is authorized by Congress. I was surprised and frankly a bit concerned when I learned that the Air Force Innovation Unit is attempting to unilaterally implement drastic changes to that program. Many of those changes diverge from the intent of the SBIR law. And I understand that you're interested in transforming the Air Force's acquisition system in order to appeal to the startup world. Instead of having companies submit Phase 1 proposals to technical topics written by the Air Force subject matter expert, the Air Force now has pitch days where literally hundreds of companies are awarded Phase 1 SBIR grants that are not in response to a specific topic, but instead give each small business initial funding and 3 months to form a feasibility study and customer discovery of the technology. I share your goal of making the Air Force and the entire DoD more adept at attracting the best innovation from the small business community, but I do have concerns about the integrity of the SBIR program. And of course, if the Air Force wants to propose a new grant program, we would be happy to consider supporting that. Can you just speak to these changes as well as the goals of these changes?
Yes, Congresswoman, it's a topic I am truly passionate about. I'll just say, I know I won't be able to answer all of your questions here. I'll be happy to come chat with you or any other members of the committee. In a nutshell, the SBIR is an amazing program. It's amazing that we have this authority to go work with early stage companies. And coming into the Air Force, the thing that was missing was the connection to the acquisition system. Mm-hmm. So companies with good technology trying to find their customer, their mission, and not having the program dollars to transition them. The other limiting factor we had is that our model didn't work really well with dual-use companies that are working on tech that could apply to both the military mission as well as a commercial mission. Mm-hmm. And so with 80% of the nation's R&D in commercial, it's a huge risk to the country if we can't work with that 80%. So what we've tried to do with the big overhaul of SBIR is bring in program dollars for transition, have a model that works with those dual-use companies who won't know how to propose to a specific DoD topic, but that can propose to an open topic, which is bring us interesting technology and let us help work on mission with you. In future, we have to do both. We have to keep the best of what worked in the past for defense-focused companies, allow them to work without having to work through commercialization channels, but we need a new process that allows commercial companies in. What I think we've succeeded on is the latter. It's getting most of the hype and buzz because it's new and it's augmenting the system in the past, but our goal is to keep the best of both going into this year, ma'am.
Great. Thank you for that. And so in terms of customer discovery, can you just speak to how, normally those were written on spec for something specific, and now customer discovery, I understand that in the startup world is kind of where I came from, but translate that to me in your world.
Yes, ma'am. So we have those specific solicitations you've referenced where we say we need a thing that flies this far, this fast, and a company that knows defense knows how to propose to that. A company with amazing technology won't have the people on staff that understand our missions. And so they may know that there's a military application, but they don't know where it is. By having very small entry-level awards around $50K, it allows the company to bring their technology, use that money to apply it to a military mission that we help them find, so that when they are talking to that customer at a phase 2 pitch day, so you've got the warfighter, the acquisition person, the technologist across the table, and they're saying what it can do, they're informed, and they don't have to have that DoD experience to get there. Last year, we did 1,000. We brought more money into SBIR than it has ever been in before because of the program dollars and private dollars that came in. We had over 1,000 contracts, 700 companies, 350 new to the government, and most of them saying they had never planned to work with us. So we're not going to do away with the old, but if that trend doesn't continue so that companies say, I'm going to go work with the Air Force because it's easy to innovate with them, we won't keep up with China. Remember, China has a nationalized industry base. So this is a model to try to mitigate that risk.
Great. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Roper, last time I saw you was at the Advanced Technology and Training Center in Warner Robins, just outside of Robins Air Force Base, and we've talked about a lot of advanced weapon systems today. Could you speak to how the Air Force is using the Advanced Technology and Training Center to improve depot maintenance with regard to the more traditional weapon systems, C-130s and things that we use today?
Yes, sir. Another topic I'm very passionate about. I mean, 70% of our money is in sustainment. So just from a business case, we should be putting more technology to lower the cost of sustainment. And coming into this job early on, I didn't know a ton about sustainment. All of my programs had always been development. So it's an amazing enterprise, sir. The depots are true national assets, but not getting a lot of the technology love from the Air Force. So we did a couple of things. We stood up the Rapid Sustainment Office to help transition technology from the research lab, from industry, into the depots and flight lines. And they've done a great job getting predictive maintenance operational, 3D printing operational, and to your point, sir, these training centers. The point of the training centers is not to dump technology on the sustainment enterprise where they don't know how to use it. So walking through early on, there was a laser in the corner of the depot, and one of them, I can't remember which one, that could strip paint off of tools that normally takes hours to do, but no one was using it simply because training wasn't there. People were afraid to. This is a friendly, off-prem facility with some of the world's leading 3D printing and other technologies like cold spray, where we help the maintainers understand how to use it, and the results have been phenomenal. And I definitely enjoyed doing the ribbon cutting with you, sir.
It's a great partnership, and I want to focus on one of the points you made. 70% of the budget is sustainment. And one of the challenges has been with the older systems, sometimes the suppliers don't have the parts that are available, and so a lot of concern about contracting on systems as we go forward. 3D printing is there. As we get into future procurement contracts, have the departments adopted any type of standard clause that the military would be entitled to standardized printable designs?
Right. I can tell you what the Army has done. When you're waiting to be confirmed, you may sit there a while, so you make a list of things that you think are important. One of the ones, having IP myself, was to develop an IP policy that meant something as opposed to what I had experienced when I was in the Army. So we developed an IP policy which gives equity to both the developer on the outside, make sure he got proper licensing coming in, and vice versa. If the government paid for it, the government should not only own it, which I found is a big problem we have, but they should get it delivered, which I was always expected to do on the outside. We have a lot of technology we paid for, we don't have in our possession. So what we have done is made a specific concerted effort. I'm trying to transition away from level 3 drawings, which give me a stack of drawings, to digital models. And that ties into advanced manufacturing. We call it advanced as opposed to additive because there's subtractive, there's conformal, there's a number of other methods as well we're trying to apply. And being able to have all that data put together in a digital thread that's available all the way out to the front edge of the battle space.
I appreciate that comment. That's one of my primary concerns. I believe in the partnerships, especially with the more advanced institutions that have been mentioned here earlier. But in the end, if we pay to develop the system, we shouldn't have to pay to use the system. There's got to be a square deal there. One of the questions I do have as we talk about the move from the development into the actual use of it, where we get into a more classified scenario, is if you have an extremely valuable person that is either in the private sector or currently working at one of the colleges, and we want to transition them into one of the departments, are you limited to the GS schedule to transition people in when they can make 2, 3, 4, 10 times more if they stay in the private sector?
Yes, sir. This committee has given us, and the NDA has given us lots of authorities. There's a variety of them we've used, and depending on the case. So I think the authorities are there. It's not yet common practice to do that at scale, I would say, across the department. So we're kind of learning from each other. We've taken the, we call 1101 authority, 150% of SES pay to max that out. That's been a great authority to bring in world's experts for us to help on different things. So I think the issue is less needing authorities. We just need to get them into practice.
But you're capped at 150% of the GS schedule.
Yes, sir.
And there's also the Enhanced Pay Authority, which has been wonderful for the Air Force. It allows us to go up to $318,000, I believe. It's letting us get great experts that wouldn't come into the government otherwise. I believe we've done 7 hires. We're able to do 10 across the Department of the Air Force. The authority expires next year, I believe, and I would certainly ask for Congress to consider extending it.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your service.
Thank you. Ms. Houlihan.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know if you all remember about a year ago when I sat in this chair as a brand new freshman, I asked you a question regarding what are we doing to elevate women and people of color in STEM and particularly in your organizations. And I'm a proud alum of MIT, and I served at Hanscom Air Force Base, so I have a lot in common with all of you folks. I also aspired when I was a young girl to be Sally Ride, but she said famously, you can't be what you can't see. So I was really excited to see that in Section 229 of the NDAA, we had the diversification of the research and engineering workforce of the Department of Defense, and that was included, thankfully, in the NDAA. And I was wondering if you might be able to give us an update or an assessment on how, or if you have learned anything since, about who works within your ranks, what your hiring practices are to encourage diversity and inclusion of more people, and what you're doing to attract more people who are not traditional STEM professionals.
Yes, ma'am. Maybe I'll start here. And again, I think great learning going across the department and diversity in all its dimensions, where gender, race, how you think, who you know, what your skills are, is our ultimate competitive advantage. And we've got to foster that. Department of Navy, a lot of focus on STEM and promoting from the earliest onset programs or at the high school intern level. We have summer interns, we have college interns, we have Naval Academy's got programs. We watch the diversity statistics in there.
But are you, in fact, watching them? I mean,
we are. Yeah. So for the summer hires last year, we had 43% female participation at the high school level, 32% at the college level. That's not obviously where we want to get to. On the U.S. Naval Academy programs, it's about 60% female, if in that one dimension. So we're watching it and then working hard within the department to have the right workforce, how we choose people, how we promote them, what the selection panels look like, so everybody's got equal opportunity as they work their way through this.
Is there anything that we can be doing to be helpful in asking for those metrics or measure performance standards? I think one thing that I reflect on in my first year in Congress was the ability to recruit for the academies, and specifically within my office, trying to make sure that I understood what of the 70 or so people who applied, what the diversity was there, and kind of asking that question across the country, I think would be a good one. Is there anything else that we can be doing to be helpful in asking?
I would say, last year asking the question was helpful.
Good.
And then continuing to ask the question. I think when I look at the NDAA, there's a broad set of authorities there, so I don't know of an authority limitation yet that I would highlight. But we've got to focus on that as we go through the expedited hiring authority and some of the hiring authorities that let us pick the best performer faster also is a help. That way we can find best of breed. And again, I would just say we need to look at it in all dimensions, gender, race, because we need the diversity if we're going to compete and win.
Absolutely. Gentlemen, do you have anything else?
Yes, ma'am, I do. We really appreciate you asking the question last year. If we're going to compete against China long-term, can't have any blind spots. You need people that see the world all different ways, because the next Jobs or Gates or whoever could be that person that's not coming into the workforce if there's not an open door. In addition to what Secretary Geurts mentioned, one thing that is helping us surprisingly in the Air Force is the direct site hire authority, because we're able to go out and work with organizations, associations that are targeting greater diversity in STEM fields, and we're able to use them as job fairs at direct hiring events. For people that wouldn't think about coming to the Air Force, haven't been exposed, don't have that background, we're able to go out to them and not use the federal hiring system that I think is too opaque and not useful. So we had 13% increase in diversity hires last year. I think that's great. Can't be satisfied with it, but we're not as diverse of a workforce as we need to be. The direct site hire authority is a great tool to help us get there.
Thank you. And other comments, gentlemen?
I would just say that we did go back and do a good survey of our workforce, trying to make sure we had a good feel for our diversity. And the Army actually came out, the report I received was that we're in good shape. We're proportional or above the percentages that the population is in.
Meaning you look like the population,
Yes.
the general population?
Right. Actually, we probably look a little bit more diverse than the general population.
And is that across all kinds of career fields or just specific career? Do you look at that depth of kind of detail?
Yeah, I didn't look at beyond the depth of the inside of the ASALT itself in general. I will say that I think that there are programs, we do have programs that do outreach to HBCUs, MSIs, et cetera. I think that we go out to 30,000. We've seen 30,000 students a year where we send professors or laboratory people out to schools, do lectures, meet people. I know that that's a big motivator. Just as you said, if I don't know this is a possibility, I don't pursue it.
Right.
And
I know that I've run out of time, and I'm so sorry for running over, but I really would like to have the opportunity to follow up with you all on this, because, we're all a bunch of engineers and geeks. Performance, it means that we have to measure it. So I just want to make sure that we genuinely have the metrics and performance standards that we're all looking towards to make sure that we're making progress. And I yield back. Thank you.
Mr. Waltz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to echo my colleague, Representative Houlihan's encouragement and continue to work on the issue of diversity. And I certainly want to thank all of my colleagues for including in the last NDAA a study for the National Academy of Science on how we can better include HBCUs and minority-serving institutions in our research and development enterprise. Dr. Griffin, I wanted to shift to some of echoing my colleague, the ranking member Stefanik's questions on talents, on how we handle our technology protection. I also sit on the Science and Technology Committee, And I'm really wrestling with how we balance the openness that is one of the fundamental aspects of academia and our research and development enterprise, and I think is one of the things that's made it great, but protect our IP. And I have to be candid, I am not going to continue supporting the funding of research and of Beijing's research and development. And I think we have to be honest and open, and really, I think, very aggressively move out on how we strike that balance. And I agree with you. I agree with your testimony that immigrants form the basis. I love the statistic that you cited on how many Nobel Peace Prize winners have gone to immigrants, 38%, I believe. But would you support legislation that limited or, frankly, barred Defense Department R&D dollars going to institutions that have research professors in the talents program? I mean, I think we need to draw a hard line. But I want your perspective, please.
Specific organizations like the 1,000 Talents program and all that can be highly suspect, and I would not want to make a blanket assertion about what legislation we could or couldn't go with. But yes, we are concerned about those kinds of organizations. We are concerned about the idea that we would not know who is doing work being done on DoD dollars. I agree.
I think we need to,
those concerns.
Dr. Griffin. I think we're all concerned. I think we've been concerned for some time. I'm interested in what concrete action and where we can draw some lines. They're stealing the way to the top, and we will continue this arms race of money. But we're facing an adversary for the first time ever in our history that is on track to have a bigger economy than ours. So we could have a long debate about our innovation talent and our values versus theirs, but I am not for continuing to pour taxpayer dollars into their R&D. And what concretely can we do? Can we help you all do to stem this siphoning that continues to happen?
I understand, and we are concerned. It is an extremely difficult problem. In order that we don't want to become our adversary in the process of remaining ahead of our adversary. We
also don't want to be sharing a world or subsumed to our adversary, which is President Xi's stated goal, through the use, China 2025, and through, essentially stealing our technological edge.
I could not agree more. I came back to the DoD in order to deal with this issue of great power competition with the skills that I can bring to the table, which are, as Ms. Houlihan was saying, geek skills and not warfighter skills. Right. But I want us to be aware of the long game, the long-term strategy of changing what got us to where we are. I want us to go after, with full force, those people who are here under false colors, those people who commit espionage or IP theft. I want us to go after the bad actors.
I think just in the interest of the time, I would welcome a follow-on with any and all of you. I'm sitting on both sides of this on both committees, but we have to be cognizant that every single Chinese student, professor, you name it, is violating Chinese law under President Xi's intelligence laws to not provide whatever they're asked for. So they have no choice. They can be the greatest people that we've ever known and wonderful and willing, but their families are held at risk should they not provide. And we have to be cognizant of that, and I think we need to take some pretty meaningful and drastic action. But thank you. I yield my time, and I look forward to a follow-on conversation with you.
Thank you, sir.
The gentleman's time has expired. We'll now have a second round of questions. I'll recognize myself first. I was wondering if the witnesses would be willing to supply the subcommittee with a list of industries or scientific areas in which U.S. companies are not the world leaders. Because it's my impression, for example, with 5G and our competition with Huawei, that the leading competitors are Ericsson and Nokia, but not a U.S.-based company. So I would be interested in areas like that, because I think sometimes we blithely assume that U.S. companies are leading the way and always on top, and I think increasingly we may not be. Facial recognition, there are a number of things where it could be that in order to get world-class expertise, we have to go outside our borders. Would you all be willing to supply the subcommittee a list like that? Okay, thank you. Second question is this, and this is a little bit more lawyer-like. I'm worried that contracting with the defense industry hasn't kept up with the times. When I was looking, for example, at the various RKV contracts, I saw in bold print at the start of the contract, the Air Force retains design authority. And that looked pretty authoritative and important. Then I looked further in the contract to see that the defense industry really was helping the Air Force come up with their design parameters. So that made me wonder if this was circular and who in fact was designing the RKV. So it seems to me, and this is just anecdotal experience, that more and more our services are essentially kind of shopping from a catalog to see what industry has to offer, as opposed to specifying to industry exactly what they need. We'll have testimony tomorrow from a very important four-star, and my purpose isn't to embarrass him, but he makes this seem like it's a virtuous thing to do. We don't know what we want, so why don't you tell us, and then we'll pick what we like. And that might work in an environment in which U.S. companies are number one, but it's not going to work if U.S. companies are second, third, fourth, fifth place.
Yes, sir. From the Department of Navy, I think it, like many things, depends, and there's no absolutes. What I would say is the government just blindly throwing out a specification without understanding is it obtainium or at what cost or price is not terribly useful. Likewise, having the contractor propose the specification without any expertise or oversight is not useful. Where we try and say in our frigate program is probably our best example of we talk about the need but not the detailed specifications and then iterate with numerous industry partners in competition to find that sweet spot of capability versus cost versus schedule. And I think that's a good place to be.
Yep, Representative, it's a great question. I can't speak to the RKV. That's under Dr. Griffin's purview. But one thing that is helping us in the Department of the Air Force are the rapid prototyping authorities that were granted by Congress. It's allowing us to push design more on the government side without tying the program to a long production and sustainment where we can't get out of it. Speeding up programs when you can prototype as the bridge between the idea and the requirements that come from it to the production line. And it's also a natural conduit to get things out of the laboratory into programs of record without having to commit to them up front. The lesson we've got to learn across the department is if we fund things late to need, then you have to go with what industry can build. If you have the foresight to fund things a little ahead of need, then you have time to explore designs when the government is driving towards a more aggressive solution. And I hope that we'll learn that lesson, sir.
Mr. Jette, Dr. Jette.
Sir, very much like Dr. Roper, there are some circumstances where just shopping is probably the appropriate thing because we need something quick. We have, in the Army, changed our lexicon. Pretty much we said we have requirements. Now we're talking about characteristics versus requirements, where requirements are the type of thing we put on the street for a production model. And the characteristics are a type of thing that we're evolving through digital design, prototyping, and a cycle between these and industry. That way we can get in all the way from just industry talking to us to building a digital design, to a refined design, to finally a prototype. And in each phase it gives us a chance to get industry input and insight where we may not have seen it, but not necessarily give our soul away to them.
My time has expired. Ms. Stefanik?
I yield the balance of my time to the final question for the minority side to Mr. Waltz.
Thank you, Ms. Stefanik. I wanted to, two questions for Dr. Jette. I just wanted to get your assessment on the realignment of the Army labs under AFC and Army Futures Command. And I'm sure you're aware there's concerns floating about short-term versus long-term and just how that alignment's going. The other question, I think, not only for you but for everyone, is we have a lot of discussion about recruiting the right talent. We were just out at the Jake, and maybe a little bit counterintuitively, for an AI center, their number one concern is human talent, right? Database managers, all of the folks that we all struggle to bring into the enterprise. One of the things that I personally seen as still serving guardsmen is that we have a database of our civilian skill sets, but it's not structured in a way that is usable, searchable, and the Guard and Reserve certainly isn't organized around it. So if you ask the Guard or the Reserves, how many people do you have working at the big 5 tech firms, or have those civilian skill sets that can be that bridge, and are they better used for that civilian skill set they bring in already cleared, already in the system, already ready to go, or are they more useful as an 04 MP, right? Military policeman or a database scientist that they're bringing to the fight. So those are the two, the labs, and then also that civilian database that somewhat exists, but I think could be used, in my opinion, could be used better, or maybe there's efforts underway that I'm unaware.
Sir, both great questions. So AFC, the laboratory system, so what were the DECs, the Development Engineering Centers, the Army Research Lab, and the Army Research Office are all under one entity, CCDC, under AFC. I have, there is an Army directive the Secretary signed out that continues my role as overarching supervisor of the facility. I work very closely with General Murray on programs. My head of my DASA R&T, who's my deputy for research and technology, participates in program reviews. We have phase gate reviews. So we're deeply involved in the technology selection, maturation. We still have transition agreements from the programs. So I think at this point, there's always, when you change something between organizations, I always say there's forming, storming, norming. We're past any of the storming. We're pretty much forming. Occasionally we'll have a tornado roll by, and then Mike Murray and I'll resolve the issue. But things are generally working fairly well. In the recruiting talent department, so it'd be interesting to see which state you're referencing, because we've just rolled out a new personnel system to the states. It's IPSA Rev 2, and it should begin picking up these type of things. We have another one which is going on, which is IPSA Rev 3. That won't be out for a little bit longer, and that will subsume everything, all 3 compos, to be able to manage, and it's got a component.
I would just encourage you to take a hard look down at the user level, because all I hear are complaints about that system. So I'll just encourage you to deep dive, because I still on the weekends jump out of perfectly good airplanes and then hear about the complaints. But it's one thing to get it structured in a new system. It's another thing, as an institution, to mine that and to utilize that, and perhaps to pluck that data scientist out of one thing where he is in his military occupational specialty and use him or her, for that civilian skill set. And I think we saw that in the stability operations world. Are they better as a deputy sheriff or as a trigger puller, right? And that back and forth. And I think I would venture to say that it's not a silver bullet, but something I'd encourage you to look at.
Yes, sir. And we never even knew the list before. Now we at least are working on getting the list. We pulled a number of them out and formed the 75th for work under AFC.
And DIUX, but it's been ad hoc. It's been, by personality and by who you know, rather than a systematic approach.
You're right, sir. It's going to take a little time to get this turned into a real process.
Thank you. Ranking Member, I yield.
Yield back.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, the subcommittee is adjourned.